It's late as I begin the trek across the campus of the University of Notre Dame. Probably too late. It's just past midnight and way past my bedtime. It's early August and the students aren't even here yet. I have never seen the campus this still. It's a night without a breeze, and even the trees don't rustle. I walk alone, and the sound of my footfalls are my only companion as they tap across old stone paths, the kind laid down by men in long black robes more than 100 years ago. Ahead, the golden dome glows faintly through the mist, like a moon trapped in scaffolding and brick. The Virgin atop it watches everything, watches me. I pass the main building. Inside, they say the lights will flicker intermittently without rhyme or reason. Maybe it's the wiring, or maybe it's something else. Maybe, some will tell you, it's the presence of Father Sorin himself. I continue beyond the empty grotto. A handful of candles still burn from earlier prayers, their flames twitching like they've just heard a sound no one else can hear. The grotto makes you want to believe in the supernatural. It smells like a prayer. Then there's the South Dining Hall, where all is peace and all is calm. But some nights, they say, you can hear the clatter of trays, laughter echoing from empty rooms, a whisper just past your ear that disappears when you turn. Or how about Washington Hall, a building that never sleeps even when it's empty? But who's there when the students are gone? They say it's George Gipp, the Gipper, dead too young, still hanging around. Maybe the scariest part is the mad dash across the road toward Notre Dame's sister campus, St. Mary's. It's somehow even quieter here, just like it always is, but on a night like tonight, that doesn't really feel like a good thing. Le Mans Hall rises out of the shadows like a cathedral. Do I see something in the bell tower? A shape? A girl? And then nothing. Probably just my mind playing tricks on me. Just ahead on the sidewalk, I swear I see someone, another traveler at this ungodly hour, but then my eyes refocus and there's nothing there. Listen, I don't think I believe in ghosts, but it's a hard conviction to hold on a night like this one. At best, it's all eerie beyond explanation. But if you believe the stories, all of it is just overwhelmingly haunted. Hello and welcome to A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum in South Bend. I'm your host, Aaron Helman, and during this series we are going to dive into some of the spooky stories that you'll find around Michiana, from ghost stories to true crime to unbelievable myths, legends, and folklore. We will take a few historical liberties with the content of some of these stories because by nature, they're rooted in rumor and legend and not historical fact. But that doesn't mean we won't learn plenty of history along the way, and my goal is to help you learn something, stay entertained, and maybe scare you out of your socks while we're at it. During the course of this episode, you'll hear fictional advertisements for very real historical companies and products. We do that to help break up the podcast, provide some levity, to include just a little more history than we could otherwise, and to give you a sense of the time and place when and where all of this is happening. And now, with all that out of the way, let's go to college, where we'll remember the stories that still echo across the campuses of Notre Dame and St. Mary's whenever someone's looking to tell a ghost story. Ghost stories on campus go way back, all the way back to the first days of Notre Dame, long before it got the word university attached to it. That shouldn't surprise us. Notre Dame started out as a boys' school, and boys, left to their own devices and with little else to do, are more than happy to invent stories for no other reason than to scare the pants off of their peers or lend a backstory to their next bawdy prank. It's unsurprising that over the course of 180 years, some of those stories have stuck. And when you hear the rumor that parts of the school were built on top of an ancient Indian burial ground, the stories feel like they've got some credence. I'm not sure if this is the oldest ghost story at the University of Notre Dame, but it's the one with the oldest roots. Ghosts of Potawatomi warriors, proud and mounted on horseback, pacing the hallways of Columba Hall late at night, unwilling to give up the lives and land that they felt had been taken from them. Nestled between St. Mary's and St. Joseph's Lake, Columba Hall exists just off of the edge of the more developed parts of campus, a perfect place to host the solitude of St. Joseph Retreat Center, and just as perfect to spawn legends of ghost stories. The legend tells that the Potawatomi burial ground is beneath the hall, but there's good reason to cast some doubt on that idea. Before the Catholics terraformed the land, the space between the lakes was a wet and swampy marsh, not exactly an ideal place to bury the dead. If the tribal horsemen are at Columba, they might just be lost. Fortunately, there are plenty of other ghosts ready to give them directions, including the Gipper himself. George Gipp never intended to become a football star. In fact, he never intended to play football at all. Gipp came to Notre Dame as a baseball player, a smooth, confident kid from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan with a pitching arm that might have been kissed by God himself and a reputation as a grade A pool hustler to boot. Coach Knute Rockne saw something else. Gipp had a long stride, a natural grace, and the kind of arm you couldn't teach. Rockne persuaded him, probably hounded him, to give football a try, and once he did, the rest is myth-making. Gipp became Notre Dame's first true star, a triple threat back who could run, pass, kick, and make it all look easy. He didn't train much, skipped practices, gambled, smoked, stayed out too late, and slept in too long. By 1920, he was the best college football player in the country. And then, just like that, he was gone. Gipp came down with what he thought was a cold. It turned into strep throat, then pneumonia. In December 1920, at just 25 years old, George Gipp died in a hospital bed in St. Joseph's Hospital in South Bend. There's a story about what he said before he died, a story Rockne told again and again, that Gipp, feverish and fading, told him, "Sometime, Rock, when the team is up against it, tell them to win one just for the Gipper." That line turned into a rallying cry, a speech, a Reagan soundbite, and a statue. And maybe a haunting. Because some people say the Gipper never really left campus. They say he's still around Washington Hall, where he used to sneak in after curfew, slipping through a window like it was his own private entrance. He'd stay up late in the green room, smoking cigarettes, rolling dice, and betting on everything from cards to coin flips. The old-timers say he carried himself like he knew he was on borrowed time. Legends don't always get to live long lives, but they do get long shadows. And maybe that's why his shadow still lingers. Over the years, students and faculty around Washington Hall have reported odd things. Footsteps overhead when no one's up there. Cold spots that drift through the hallway like someone brushing past. Lights that flicker for no reason. In the auditorium, music plays on its own. A piano plays a single sour note long after the rehearsal's done. There's a story about a janitor locking up late one night, doing one last walkthrough. He swears he saw a figure standing center stage, bathed in moonlight leaking through the high windows, wearing what looked like an old football uniform, leather helmet, broad shoulders, arms crossed. When the janitor blinked, the figure was gone. And then there's the scent, this strange, sour mix of cigarette smoke and liniment oil that shows up now and then in the dressing rooms. One theater called it the locker room ghost, before he realized it always happened after midnight, and only during football season. But amazingly, George Gipp isn't even the most famous guy whose ghost is alleged to haunt the campus, and when we get back from the break, we'll go all the way back to the very beginning with Father Sorin himself.
Come on out to the Granada Theater in South Bend for the world premiere of Knute Rockne All-American on October 4th, 1940. Meet the stars who made the film, including Pat O'Brien and Ronald Reagan, and be the first of your friends to see the film that South Bend will be talking about for years to come. And now, back to A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum.
If you want to understand Notre Dame, you have to start with Father Sorin. Born in France, ordained in the Congregation of Holy Cross, he came to the United States as a missionary in 1841. He was just 28 when he arrived in the wilds of northern Indiana, young, ambitious, and not the least bit intimidated by the cold or the mud or the swampy land around two quiet lakes. Where others saw hardship, Sorin saw opportunity, and what's more, he saw destiny. In 1842, he founded Notre Dame du Lac, Our Lady of the Lake, on land given to him by the Bishop of Vincennes. And then he got to work. Sorin didn't build Notre Dame alone, but he built it like only a man who believed God was personally watching could. He insisted on brick when others wanted wood. He built tall when others asked for small. He pushed, he scolded, he inspired. He came with audacious goals that others would have called impossible, but he reached all of them. And when it all came burning down, he built it back all over again. Sorin was already 65 when the main building was reduced to ashes in 1879. He'd given his life to this place. It would have been easy to step aside, to let others rebuild what he had started. But instead, he stood in the ash and ruin, pointed to the sky, and told the brothers and students around him, "If it were all gone, I should not give up. Tomorrow we will build again, and build it bigger." And they did. By the time he died in 1893, Sorin had transformed the swampy lakeside into one of the most important Catholic institutions in the country. The dome rose like a crown over campus. The Sacred Heart Church rang out with bells. Notre Dame had become what he said it would, a force. This is where the history ends and the ghost story begins, and that tends to happen when someone important like Father Sorin dies on Halloween. Some say Father Sorin never left. They say his presence still lingers in the main building, the very structure he refused to surrender to fire and now allegedly refuses to surrender in death. There are reports of cold drafts in sealed-off stairwells, footsteps in empty offices, doors opening without a sound, a sudden weight in the air that settles on your shoulders when you're alone. One longtime administrator used to joke that Sorin watches the admissions office like a hawk, making sure no one lowers the standards. But then, maybe it's not a joke. Maybe that explains why the lights only flicker in the hallway that looks toward the basilica, and that no electrician has been able to explain yet. There was the security guard making his rounds in the main building just after 2 a.m, no students, no staff, just the sound of his boots on the tile. As he passed by the grand staircase, he saw an old man standing near the third-floor landing. Black coat, stiff posture, white hair. He thought it might have been a resident priest who'd somehow gotten himself locked in. The security guard called out to the man but received no answer. He climbed the stairs to investigate further, and when he reached the landing, there was no one there. Another version of the story has Sorin wandering the grotto, where he used to pray before dawn. People say if you pass by before sunrise, you might see a man in a cassock kneeling alone. When you blink, he's gone. Of course, the University of Notre Dame isn't the only Catholic university around these parts, and when we get back from the break, we're crossing the street to visit St. Mary's, where it's even quieter during the late nights. And it's certainly spookier.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are born free and equal, and possess certain unalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the wearing of boots and shoes. In 1845, the best place to get your boots and shoes is at William W. Clark and Company on Michigan Street in South Bend. And now, back to A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum.
If Notre Dame is the loud, boastful brother, then St. Mary's is the quiet sister who knows how to keep a secret. Founded in 1844, just 2 years after Father Sorin laid the first foundations for Notre Dame, St. Mary's was the work of the Sisters of the Holy Cross. They'd come to teach the area's girls, French and Irish immigrants mostly, and they arrived with the same determination, the same fire, and the same impossible mission as Sorin and his brothers. For nearly 2 centuries, Notre Dame and St. Mary's have grown in tandem, separate campuses, separate identities, but inextricably linked by faith, tradition, and a walking path across the busy road. The architecture at St. Mary's is quieter, more restrained. Red brick, slate roofs, tall windows that seem to watch as you pass. The college buildings rise out of the landscape like they've always been there. Lamons Hall, Holy Cross Hall, the Avenue. There's a deep sense of stillness here. It feels sacred, it feels old, and it feels watched. Ask around, and you'll start to hear the stories. The most famous is probably the faceless nun. She wears the full habit, long and black, a white wimple pulled tight. But where her face should be, there's nothing, just a blank void. No eyes, no mouth, no expression at all. The legend says she's been walking slowly down the avenue, gliding across the grass outside Holy Cross, or just standing near the woods at dusk, always still, always silent. Some say she's the spirit of a sister who gave her life in service and faded into anonymity, forgotten even in death. Others claim something darker, that she represents loss, trauma, or penance. There's no official record, of course, no names, no photos, just stories passed down in hushed tones from roommate to roommate, RA to freshman, as the autumn nights get colder and the windows begin to fog. One version of the story tells of a student returning from a late-night study session. The air is thick with fog and the campus is empty. But as she crosses the avenue, she sees someone ahead, tall, still, and facing her. A nun. She doesn't think much of it. You see nuns here sometimes. So the student just nods politely and keeps walking. But as she gets closer, something feels wrong. The figure isn't moving. It's not blinking. And when the student passes close enough to look, there's no face. Just blank white cloth, smooth and hollow. The student runs. Doesn't stop until she's back in her dorm. Door locked, lights on. She never walks the avenue after dark again, which raises the obvious question. What the heck am I doing out here? There's an easy answer. I'm looking for something. I'm looking for the girl in the bell tower of Lamons Hall. This one's harder to pin down. There are no news clippings, no dates, just a whisper of a tragedy. A student years ago, maybe the 30s, maybe the 50s, who climbed to the top of the bell tower and never came back down alive. The cause is always different. A broken heart, a failed exam, a secret no one ever found out, but the ending's always the same. They say that sometimes, late at night, if you stand at the far edge of campus and look up, you might see her, a faint silhouette behind the tower windows, hanging, still, just for a second. Blink and she's gone. And then there are the smaller stories. Whispers of footsteps in empty corridors, the rustle of skirts when no one's there, sudden cold that settles in your room like someone else is with you, the elevator in Le Mans stopping on the wrong floor again and again, always at 3:17 a.m. Even a skeptic like me has to admit, St. Mary's feels different at night. It's not threatening, it's not evil, but it feels like there's just something there. probably just the weight of a long past, maybe just the sounds endemic to old trees and old buildings, or maybe it's the sisters, those who built this place with their hands and their prayers, still watching over the campus they refuse to leave behind. Because if Notre Dame is the house that Sorin built, then St. Mary's is the one the sisters filled with memory, mystery, and maybe a few ghosts of their own. Hey, thanks for joining us on A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum in South Bend. There's more history waiting for you at historymuseumsb.org. I'm your host, Aaron Helman. The theme music is Whose Distance Is It Anyway by Neil Carmichael. Our next episode will head over to Primrose Road, long thought to be the most haunted and eerie place in South Bend. And spoiler alert, we're going there at night, during a full moon, and on foot. I hope you'll tune in for that one next. Until then, keep learning new things, and remember, everything is fascinating as long as you stay curious.